The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey, this is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss, starting off with another group of website evaluations for the 2020 Orchestration Challenge. This time we are studying, we are orchestrating Lily Boulanger's D'un Jardin Clair. And this score by Roque is really, really cool. There are a lot of neat things. There are a few weird mistakes. Right in here you've got low E when actually the lowest note should be an F sharp, right? It's supposed to be the stretch of a seventh there rather than an octave between the bottom two notes in the piano. Anyways, not a big deal. There are a bunch of little things to cover. But this is a really great effort and a really great start to this particular collection. I really like the string textures. I like the this really cool opening in bassoon and clarinet. Now, you have to tell us how many of each, right? Here you say flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons. That doesn't tell me anything. How many of each? 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, right? And then as each instrument enters, you have to tell us how many of each instrument is being used, right? Is this 2 oboes, like A2, A2, right? Or is this just a single oboe, like which you would write 1 period for the first oboe? All right, so you have to let us know how many of each. And but I still like this idea here of the clarinets separated by 2 octaves and then 1 octave. That's a neat idea. It's very counterintuitive and it works nicely. Now here you say tremolo, but that's not really a good way of notating this. You should actually have tremolo beams, the triple beam over the stem, and then don't even use the word tremolo. And that will actually be much more readable. The problem with writing this, just saying tremolo at the beginning of a passage, is what if there's a page break? Then the player might, the player might look at the next staff and then not realize that it's still tremolo, right? So it's really better. Use the triple beam for the unmeasured tremolo. Okay. There is another problem here too, and that is clarinets in B flat. The transposing puts you into this key of 7 sharps, and actually it should be 5 flats, right? So instead of C sharp major, this should be D flat major and harmonically transposed, right? So if you are able to do that in your notation application, then you should, okay? And there are a bunch of little things like these these bars should go across. They should be covering groups that are in the same brace, right? Same thing here with the celesta. There should be the bar line going across both staves. All right. Okay, so just, a few notation things there. Now let's talk about the actual scoring, which is it's very cool, except um, it's sort of missing some bits, right? It's missing some parts. So here, like you are interpreting the melody really beautifully, and you get to here, and then suddenly everything just climbs down, and so I feel like we never got to the apex of the idea, right? It never quite realized itself in those long F sharps at the end, right? And in fact, like the F sharps are here in the winds where we can't hear them, and we have like G sharp and E as the most prominent thing that we can hear. And also same thing here, like this D, written D here, is actually sounding D sharp. Sorry, written D sharp, sounding G sharp down a fifth. So that G sharp is also going to contribute to the G sharp an octave higher, and really, so that we kind of lost the sense of melody here. So I'm wondering why that was. Like, why this arc didn't just continue on higher and higher. So maybe that was an experiment that you wanted to try, and that's fine, because like it's fine to adapt the material and have it do different things, and you're also sort of following the natural arc, like you are matching the arc of the melody to the dynamic push, right? So as the dynamics push, the melody climbs. As they release, the melody climbs back down. However, I mean, that's all well and good, except like these horns in here are going to be so bright and so powerful. Like you're going mezzo forte, sforzando, and they're just going to push out of. I mean, you could even hear that in the mock-up, in the recording that you supplied. The brass are so bright in there; they're so strong. I just really cannot. I mean, the rest of the texture is minimal, and we can't even hear the ending properly of of your idea right in here, as you changed it. Okay, so but everything else is cool. The celesta is nice, but you could hear it's almost invisible, right? And then harp, that's fine. And I really like the first harp part. I like the fact that you have two harps. In fact, that's a neat idea. Okay, and the harp writing towards the end was very interesting, very intriguing. But texturally, so it just needs a little bit of work in terms of the dynamics, and so like putting a sforzando at the end of a phrase that is like. So I'm just wondering if that might have been an error, or maybe you intended to put like piano there or something that might have been more in character and might have helped your adaptation, right? All right, so we get into the second phrase here. And that's more conventionally orchestrated. Ba-da-dee-da-bum. Um, it's kind of interesting that you kind of jump, like first you've got like this higher and then this lower as a kind of an answer, and that's also an interesting choice. And little punctuating staccatos in the bass, right? And that we've got here, pizzicato. So, all right, so we have to talk a little bit about sustained pizzicato. So here you have pizzicato notes marked, and you've got this hairpin, and the music is really not that fast, right? So it's better to mark pizzicato just as like as quarter notes, or even as half notes, but like you would have to say piano sostenuto to really let the player know that you haven't accidentally put pizzicato over notes that are intended to be bowed, right? So this whole sense of gradual increase is not possible on pizzicato. It really is like, piano pizzicato, mezzo forte, forte. Now, of course, you can put a hairpin crescendo over or under, excuse me, pizzicato notes that are sustained, but it just really looks like notes that were intended to be bowed. I think it would be better just to say piano, sostenuto, and then maybe have half notes instead of dotted half notes, just to be clearer that because there's really no way that the pizzicato is going to have the same character as the arco notes above it, right? It's just it's not going to have that same kind of thing, right? Okay, so all right, so back to this second part. So we have the little call and response. So that's flutes and clarinets plus violins, and then oboes and clarinets with violas and cellos. That's nice. And then these little downward cascades with horn and harps and a little bit of celesta on top, chiming. That is all going to work great. Okay, that's fine. So here we get to the bum 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 bum. Okay, that's all. I feel like when you do not include the strings in the top line. See, like you've got your top line right here. It starts with F sharp, right? But you are having your first violins play D instead. Right, so this is kind of a weaker, like you're having the strings play inner parts, right? So that they don't. It's really the winds that take over the main melody here. You've got like these big strong octaves here across the winds, and first horn as well. So I mean, I feel that like it kind of makes for an awkward texture because the strings are not the strings are just relegated to harmonizing with the winds, and it really should be the other way around, right? It should be strings involved, at least, if not leading, the top line of the melody, with the winds providing harmony in the middle, right? And we've got a little bit of harmony going on there in the brass and the horns, but it's still just a little awkward in terms of the feeling of the texture there. And maybe it's just a bit much in terms of celesta, right? So by the time we get here, we really can't hear this celesta at all, right? You can write a forte on that celesta, but everybody else will be playing forte what they think of as forte. And the celesta itself actually has very, very limited dynamic range. So the celesta player can hit the notes harder, but it really won't sound louder very much, right? It's just a very limited range. So it probably won't come through at all right in here. Maybe a little bit here at the end. Okay. Now, did you notice right at the end you you went to this resolution and it just seemed like it was hanging there in the middle of nowhere? You just have to carry on, right, to get that idea to work. So look at how in the piano part the harmony around the phrase is continuing on till the end of the bar, right? So like when you leave these rests here. Right, and you can hear it in the mock-up too. It's just like suddenly this was so naked, so exposed that it just really felt awkward. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, and now we're resolving. That's the end of that, right? So so watch out for that. I think part of it was that you were going pianissimo in the horns, which is great, diminuendo, which is fine, but then by the end of here they were just completely gone, right? So. Part of that is the mock-up, but part of it really is just the fact that you're letting everybody off the hook, and rather than continuing on, like see the F sharp is supposed to continue on to the end of the bar, right? So you've got that in a very soft instrument, the flutes, but doubled by the oboes. Once again, we don't know how many of each wind instrument is supposed to play, right? And some of these textures could have been better if, you could have had two oboes playing instead of flute and clarinet, right? So like you have the option of having more than one wind player, right? If this is plural flutes, right? Not just a flute and a single oboe and a single clarinet and single bassoon. Okay, so anyway, so aside from that, it was a really, really fun score, and I just really enjoyed like the imagination from this and like all of the entries that I've been looking at this morning. Really, really fun. I just get a huge charge out of these evaluations, and I'm so happy that you guys are able to provide them and to be part of this really wonderful community of orchestrators. You guys really make it something very special for me, and I appreciate it so much. So let's get on to the next evaluation. Now we've got Antonio's score, and this has got some very cool ideas in it. You could sort of hear that that triangle sound was a little kind of thunky, kind of didn't really have any sustain to it. So you might want to look into that, Antonio, if just see if you can get a better sound in your mock-up. But generally speaking, this was just very nicely done. Now, I felt that saying that, there were some gestures that started to get a little old after a while. Like this was really, this was beautiful at the beginning. This harp arpeggio, and then happened again. That was great. And then you had these rolls, which are kind of a similar idea with the celesta playing a little bit, and then we started to get it again and again and again, right? So you might want to hold back on some of these things. Don't fall in love with something. Just, ask yourself whether you really need to do something more than a few times, more than a couple of times. It's sort of like in writing, they tell you to kill your darlings. And what they mean by that is that you might come up with a really great idea, like a great way of putting things or a great way of thinking about something. And then, you write into your first paragraph, and then it shows up in your second paragraph and your third and your fourth and fifth. And it's just something that you just get used to doing, right? So it's the same thing here. This is a darling of yours, so I would say kill it, or think of some other thing to do so that the ear doesn't just start focusing on it. Sort of like that guy at the party with the very, very bright shirt, right? And the first time you see him, you say, "Oh, isn't that interesting how that bright orange color contrasts against everybody's like blue and brown and white shirts." But then like you see him showing up over and over again, and you just start to like notice it instead of the rest of the crowd around him, right? So watch out for things that repeat that much, that that are that unique. I mean, it still is cool the way that you have the celesta coming off of it, but maybe it could be celesta instead of harp, or some other way of doing things. And it's a shame because like you have this motion in here with the clarinets that is really lovely, right? That's what we should be focusing on, not on the harp. You have another thing in here where you ask the first trumpet player to play, and then the second trumpet player plays all the way up to A flat, right? So really should be reversed. The person who's playing the highest should be the first trumpet player, although A flat is no big deal for either trumpet player to play, but it's just that really is just the domain of the first player. My feeling is that the whole thing should be played by first trumpet, right? And then save the second trumpet for here, because you never know who is going to be playing your work, right? It's always best to trust the solo playing the featured line to the first player, okay? And there's one other thing too that is really important that you need to understand is don't slur past a slurred staccato, right? Your slurred staccato should cover the notes that are staccato, because this doesn't make any sense, right? You're going right? That is the mezzo staccato, right? It's the light staccato. So there is nothing happening between these two notes. These two notes do not have any relationship because this is not a mezzo staccato. So you are taking a slur which is intended to convey the idea of mezzo staccato, and then you're using it to extend the phrase into this next note, but there is no sense of, like, I mean you could say, oh well, maybe that's all under one breath, but the player is already going to be breathing like that, right? So the slur just makes no sense here. The slur should only cover the notes that are staccato, right? Because you are conveying the meaning of a type of articulation. It's the same thing here, right? You're going staccato, 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 accent. That doesn't make any sense. It should just be bum, 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 and then accent, right? Because the slur is not doesn't mean to connect, right? It's not melisma like right here, right? So this is perfectly acceptable because it's all being done in one breath, right? But involves different pushes with the abdomen, right? To make it kind of bright. So yeah, don't slur off of a slurred staccato. All right, see, this is fine, right? All right, okay, so now let's talk about the orchestration. Okay, so this starts off pretty nicely. Um, you English horn echoing the oboe. That's nice. Then clarinet building on oboe, building on the flute, and a little bit of piccolo at the end. So that's all really nicely done. The original idea of the phrase right in here is very nicely transported into the winds with the accompaniment of the strings, right? So in this case, the strings don't play a big role or don't play any role thematically, but since that is given over to the wind groups, that's great. The only thing that I would say about this is that there is like no wind support at all, right? So there's no sense of a mixed texture in here. It's all going to be strings, right? And I mean, in a way that's fine, but like, yeah, here's another thing that might get old is like how much triangle can go ting with right here, right? After a while it just starts to repeat and you start to notice it too much, right? Like you could leave it off here because the celesta it robs the celesta of its charm, right? So maybe you could go ting, 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 and that's it, and then just cut the rest of it, right? Yeah, but basically this is all very carefully calculated to just be doubling each other all the way up until you get to here, and that's all right. Yeah, but yeah, I just kind of hoped for more winds involved with the strings somehow, but that's all right. Okay, but as I said before, the motion in here, the cello and viola, and doubling bass clarinet and clarinets, that's all really nice, and I really do love this right in here with these with the bassoons and the tremolo second violins. It's all just very charming. This little rising line here in the flutes, that's really, really great. See, like, you don't need this harp in here, right? Everything else is just done very nicely. Just a touch of timpani in there, pizzicato basses. That all makes perfect sense. Contrabassoon. Yeah, and then, yeah, this works great. The horns with a cushion behind them of the strings, that's nice. And then here, though, I missed the sense of harmony, right? So, like, this is harmonized in both phrases in the piano, right? And here it was just played as octaves, and that didn't quite translate as well, right? I mean, you could have given this note to the English horn and then had the oboes fill in the notes here. Now, everything is incredibly delicate here, so it is possible to hear this lower note here on flute. But if you were going to harmonize with oboes and flutes, it would be better to stack them, to have the oboes playing the lower notes and the flutes playing the upper notes. Right? Now, this is really neat. Flutter tonguing. I mean, bum 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 bum. and then ending with the horns, bum, with a little rum. I feel that you're conveying wind and bird song and everything else, and that is a cool idea. But maybe if it were a little softer, do you know what I mean? Or maybe started soft, like started at piano and then pushed into mezzo forte and came back down, right? And you have to tell us where you're going, right? How does this end? I really like the fact that you have taken some care here in marking, who is playing when, like first, second, and so on. But what about here? Right? Is this a due? All right. What is going on here? It's the piccolo. Sorry. Yeah, a due there. So that's fine. But it wasn't that so much that I was. What was it? It was. Yeah, just like where are we heading to? Destination dynamics, right? Mezzo forte down to what? Right, bass clarinet is that going to be ending with piano? Because otherwise, mezzo forte, it's going to be very strong against everybody else here, right? So, yeah, so just make sure that you know where you're heading, and maybe have things like the dynamics a little bit more worked out in a couple places. But I mean, otherwise, it's just a really fun, just such a really great approach to this, and really enjoyable to look at, and to just see more and more as I go through these evaluations, just all the different approaches, and the great imagination of my community out there. So, all right, so I will leave it at that. But yeah, but like super, just a super fun approach to this, and just maybe clean it up a little bit and score the rest of it, and see if you can get somebody local to play it for you. Like I think that would be my advice for a lot of people out there who are submitting these entries. So yeah, so lovely, really loved it. On to the next evaluation. Our next score is from Frano, and this was just really a delight. I just really liked the freshness of this, and the lightheartedness, and some really fun ideas. The first thing that I'm going to talk about Frano is just really watch out about broadcasting. I'm trying to think of a simpler way of putting it, but I hear a lot of composition teachers and composers talk about this as broadcasting, which is like setting up something the same way, or getting ready to emphasize something with, like, probably the most typical thing is like a glissando or like a run. Like you do this a couple of times in a row, and then you have another glissando here. So we just always know that you're about to come up with a new idea. It doesn't just evolve naturally. It's just always like, hey, look at this. So I would say just try to lighten up on that. It is something that is inspiring. It feels good to do. But just like I was saying with the previous score, sometimes you have to kill your darlings, right? Something that is just really special to you and is really fun to do. Well, once you've done it once, then like the more you do it, the more you call attention to it, the less natural it is, right? So just really watch out about over broadcasting, okay? Once or twice is okay, but just all the time, just a little strange. Okay, and then like there were some really long slurs with accents in the middle. So watch out about, like you have to think that like here you're saying tenuto, so there's like a very long full note, and then accent again, right? So wouldn't it be better to have the slur start at the beginning of the accent, right? So that the player could go down, down, right? Rather like, and here you don't slur the tenuto, right? So what shouldn't these be the same? Why not just have a slur at the beginning of each bar, right? So like it's just much more natural, right? And you don't need to accent the last note, right? It's already forte. Yeah, so yeah, maybe yeah. It's just this is going to be very very powerful and very it's like an accent is like a punch, right? The person is pushing with their diaphragm to just make it, or they're tonguing it, right? I'm talking about winds, right? Or they are like digging in with the bow just on the right at the beginning. So I mean, does it all have to be like that all the way through? Because this is a really beautiful, light, natural, unfolding phrase, right? So do we really want to force things so much? I mean, other than that, like the colors are really nice here, and I really do like this combination of lower winds with middle strings. It's just a really lovely, lush kind of a sound, and it's really interesting that you keep the violin. You're just doubling from below rather than playing along with all the other pitches. I do have to warn you though that this is really kind of wasted. Like this low F sharp here and this low E in the flute part. It would be better, you could have a partial octave, and when you get to these low notes, anything below G sharp or G, just have that note double, like have it go unison with the first flute, and the other pitches can be doubled by other instruments. Like here you have like the second oboe, or first, I guess they're maybe unison. I don't really know. Once again, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoon. So obviously this is two bassoons and two of everything. So you should say that here. 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons. How many French horns? 4. 4 French horns. You have to tell us right here on this first page how many of each. It's not enough just to say flutes, right? And then when they come in, oboes, is this like first oboe, second oboe? Which oboe is that? Is it 1 oboe? Is it 2 oboes? I want to know, right? I'm the conductor. I need to know who to glare at, if they got it wrong. Okay? And then here, like if this is going from 2 parts to a unison, you have to put that in, right? So it has to be like, right here you have to say A2, A2, right? Okay. But to get back to my other point, this note is being covered beautifully by the oboes, I guess, and the first violin. So it doesn't need to be played by the second flute. The second flute, that nobody's going to hear them, right? So make them feel happier by just having them play where they can be heard. So this would go unison, and then you could go back to your octave here if you really need to. Same thing with this E. I mean, it's being covered by clarinet anyway. Now, just like I said in a previous score, transposing, you might as well transpose to the enharmonic here of D flat rather than C sharp major. Okay? And that just is just easier on everybody. You might get into like double flat here and there as you go, but that's okay. Like the players can read that. That's no big deal. Just so long as there aren't a lot of them really fast and written very confusingly. Okay, and then you've got your harp here, and yeah, that's all good. All right, so let's look at the next page. Okay, so here we get into some interesting stuff. Cup mute. Okay, you cannot just write cup mute on a score. You have to say open or closed. All right, because open, it makes a sort of an E sound. It has kind of an E sound, and then when you close it, it goes oh. So it like has like those different vowel sounds of human speech. Okay. Now see here you were good. You said A2. All right, that's great. And then, but what's going on here? Is this A2 going to intervals, right? So yeah, so you have to work that out a little bit better for us score readers. Okay, so let's talk about the orchestration. Yeah, I mean, it's a little confusing here. Horns 1 and 2. It would be better to have this A2 with the, with the first and second horn, because they're partners. They have the best intonation. It doesn't matter that like the third horn player is sort of like a second first horn. It's really the second player who is the partner of the first, and their intonation matches, their articulation, everything. They're sitting next to each other. They know each other. The second player's job is to read the first player's mind. So why are you asking the third player to read his mind, right? So just watch out for that. Just try to, just say Atu. It's fine. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So now let's talk about some scoring. So this is nice. I like the cut mute trumpets, and it's going to be a little thorny. There's going to be a slightly thorny sound to this, but it's still going to work fine. I would actually say, I would mark the brass piano, even the a duet trumpets, right? I would have them play piano, and I would have the strings play mezzo forte. Okay, and then you'll get a balance. And that way you don't have to mix, like do all this dynamic mixing of like, oh, this guy's mezzo forte, that guy's piano, this guy's mezzo piano, blah blah blah. Try to have a foreground and a background dynamic rather than having everybody play all different dynamics. Because you have to think, these people are all sitting in a section next to each other. So, the trombonist will be playing, will have a piano marking, but the tuba will come in and play mezzo piano. And so the tuba player will think, so the tuba player playing mezzo piano, the trombonist will think, well, that's kind of that's a louder than piano sound, but I guess I better match him. And then like this guy might think, well, I guess everybody's being quieter. Don't they all have mezzo forte in their parts? Well, I guess we're all going for a softer mezzo forte here, right? So it's really better to mark sections, groups of players with similar dynamics, and then just have the register do the work of the dynamic balance, right, within the section of players. Okay, and then so this is all fine. The harp and the staccato, and you could even just go piano crescendo and not even leave the mezzo forte in there, right? You don't actually have to mark the destination dynamic all the time at the end of a crescendo, and that leaves it up to the conductor to balance it, right? But it's fine that you put the mezzo forte there. Okay. All right, and then bum 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 bum. Yeah, so this is nice. It's like lower heavy brass plus bassoons plus plus strings. And did you notice that you can't hear the harp in your mock-up? Well, your mock-up is telling you the truth there. You won't be able to hear the harp in a live situation either, right? Then you end up on this nice chord blended soft brass, soft strings. Here I would mark the bassoons and strings, piano, and I would mark the brass pianissimo. Okay, so really great score. Really enjoyed it. I know I'm being really picky with this one, but that's why you sent me this score. If you didn't need any advice, you wouldn't need to send it to me, right? And then I wouldn't get the pleasure of looking at it, which is just really enjoyable. So thank you so much for your entry, and now let's look at the next one. Now for Alex's score, and I really enjoyed this. Alex, you've got such a questioning spirit. Like you're always leaving me huge questions on YouTube that I just sometimes I just don't have time to answer all the things that all the things that you pose. And I know that you're not. I know you're not trying to be difficult or anything like that. You just are very curious about all the things that I say, and I really do appreciate that. That interest that you've got, that wonderful curiosity. And you can see some of that in your works here. Some of your reinterpretation, your adaptation as opposed to transcription. So it's all very cool. It's a pity some of this is a little bit wasted on the fact that I can only interpret the first 20 bars of your entry. You go on here with this really cool passage here in solo strings, along with a little bassoon and basset horn, a kind of a cool idea. And most of these lines are kind of following the ensemble strings, and there's just a little bit sticking out here. So I'll talk about a lot of those things in a second. Now, cut off a little bit in this screen is the are these asterisks, and this one is basically saying this could also be played on a standard flute, and this could be played on a standard B-flat clarinet. All right, that's all good. So, I think it's an interesting choice. The basset horn is kind of like the viola of the clarinets, right? It has a slightly cut off sound, similar to the viola. It's like not as bright. It's slightly muted, and that in itself has its charm. Like, as of course everybody may have heard from the Mozart Requiem, where the basset horn is used in several key places. Just a wonderful sound. And then, alto flute, I mean, if you're just going for timbre right in here, that's perfectly justified, and there's nothing wrong with assigning it. What is wrong with the alto flute is just assuming that it is as powerful as the other instruments around it, right? So, like here, when you get into the combinations with the English horn, right? The English horn is just going to wipe it out, right? So you just have to choose the moments wisely. Now here it's not so bad because you're going to pianissimo, right? There was one thing that kind of stuck out at me, and that you've got this little line here, this that you added, this little bit of harmony, E E E E D sharp or E. Sorry, I'm still stuck in B major, E D E E E E D. But okay, so that's cool. Like the first time I heard it, it was nice, and then the second time it's like, well, yeah, I've heard that before. And then right at the end, the resolution E D. Right, so like I've already heard it twice, right? So the third time that motion appears, I kind of, it doesn't really have the same. It doesn't have the same interest for me anymore as a listener, right? So just watch out about, overdoing it on some of those things. Maybe just like once would be good, and then you can have a contrast with it, not just dynamically, but in terms of the amount of harmony you're putting in there. And then right at the end here, then like when it comes back, it's not so. It hasn't been used up so much. Okay, so let's talk about the orchestration. So the first problem that I'm noticing here is that we've got. Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful the way that you've interpreted this. I mean, I feel as this is a pretty long phrase here. I think that these should match, right? You maybe just make the slur go all the way up to this G, and then same thing here, and then just continuing on, right? So that the breathing kind of matches and things kind of fall on the downbeat more, right? You probably heard of me griping already if you've watched both of these first two videos about slurring across the downbeat, it just has a tendency to really weaken the pulse of the music. And I mean, I can, there's a certain anticipatory phrasing in this piece where the slurring does cross the downbeat a lot, especially towards the end of the piece. So I don't want to be like a purist about it, but just just saying, like, watch out for that. Trying to, like, having certain gestures match up, like right in here. There's like no need for you to slur these differently, in terms of bowing. Like, it just really works out better. Like, the players can follow each other. If one group of first is bowing different from the other, it can just like throw things off from time to time too, right? I mean, even though these are divisi parts, it's still so just with very simple, a simple one bar slur. Sometimes it's just better to be unified all the way across. So anyway, just watch out for overdoing it on that. And then, also, da 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 da. I mean, like how much do you want it to subtract from the fact that you're arriving somewhere? Okay, I won't overdo it. But the big problem I shouldn't distract myself from is that the apex here is being carried by a single instrument, which has to compete against very powerful, by comparison, instruments like the flute and the oboe and the rest of the strings, right? So if these strings cooled way down, like if they were at like piano, like if everybody was at piano by the time they got to this bar, then this would be audible, right? But it kind of isn't. I mean, you can even hear that in the mock-up. The mock-up is not lying to you. It really has a almost throwaway, right? Kind of an effect there, rather than just really surging out of the. I mean, you could write this forte dolce. Do you know what I mean? And then, like, don't even bother with the diminuendo there. Just put the diminuendo on the very last note, like diminuendo off, right? That way the player could really yack it up, as I've heard certain solo violinists refer to their, to really just really ham it up. All right. But I mean, everything else is pretty nicely scored. There's just nice combinations right in there. Good carrying forth of the melody, and the basset horn is a neat idea, and then just kind of using it a little bit as just a standard clarinet slash like almost bass clarinet kind of a role. So for people who are having problems reading this, basset horn is just basically like French horn or English horn. What you are reading is sounding down a fifth, right? So this is actually G way down there, right? Which is basically doubling what's happening in the viola. And then, of course, don't forget your tenor clef reading of the bassoon here, right? So that last beautiful high note right there is an F, right? Which is doubling what's going on in the second violins. Okay. Now, going on to this, I feel this is nice. This, I was kind of stressing a little bit too much, maybe, but maybe just cutting out the middle one, because it just really tends to take over the music. Like, it's like, especially when you go dun 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 dun, dun, I mean, I feel maybe it's kind of starting to dominate the idea, and then using it up by the time you get to there. Okay, this is gonna sound a little strange, this kind of thing, but I mean, it's fun. It's it's not going to be heard too much with the horn kind of playing around the same area, and then, like, of course, basset horn and bassoon coming in here at the end. A little bit of viola there, so in the middle voice, but yeah, it'll it's going to be fine. Maybe this is another place where it doesn't have to happen twice. The second violins are getting a lot of attention doing things that you added to the music, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, just really fun. Um, now finally we got the bum 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 bum. So pretty nicely done actually. Uh, I just feel a little bit of an absence of the first violins of upper strings contributing to this, right? And once again, it wouldn't hurt anything to have the first violins playing the same thing as the flutes, but down an octave, right? So that they could contribute to the brightness of the top line, rather than just kind of being a murkier central element. Do you see what I'm saying? So basically doubling the English horn line, right? And then it will have like a fuller sound without. I mean, this will have like it'll be a less resonant flute line on top because it doesn't have any support from the strings below, right? Whereas you have other elements in your music that have support from instruments below, right? That from the strings adding to their just their octave overtones, coloring the music a little bit. So, but anyways, it's still pretty cool. I mean, I love that horn right in there, and it's going to be nice and colorful. This will be probably something that needs to be balanced a little bit, and the hornist will just do it. They'll play like more mezzo piano right in there. But yeah, and then your nice little resolution chord right in there. Yeah, so I mean, it's really nicely done, Alex. I just really enjoyed looking at this and like just seeing what you can do. And of course, you scored out the whole piece, which is a bit of a wrench. I mean, it would really, I mean, if you're going to put that much work into it, I mean, if you really want to put me to work for a whole hour evaluating everything, then probably like, supporting on Patreon just for a month or so next time the challenge comes along might be worth of an investment. It's like getting a lesson from me, in essence. But I mean, it's so cool, like using the basset horn. It just really makes me want to keep going and talking about more things, because there are more things to talk about, definitely, as we go on. But this is good enough. What a great contribution to the challenge. I just feel that like every one of these videos so far, and I'm only on the second one, I'm feeling so optimistic about it, and just really seeing everybody's approach and everybody's new ideas. So thanks again, and now let's get on to the next evaluation. Perfectly enchanting, Gustavo. Just really nice. Once again, great ideas, individual flavor of orchestration, everything else. So nice. So I'm going to cover a few little things to pick on, and then we'll talk about the overall orchestration. So first thing is, while I'm looking at it, cup mute. You want to use cup mutes on your trumpets and trombones. That's all great, but you got to say whether or not you want an open or closed cup mute, just like I mentioned before in a previous score. So the closed cup mute has the open cup mute has a kind of an E sound, and the I'm getting this mixed up. The open cup mute has an E sound, and the closed cup mute has an O sound, right? So whether you want that E or O kind of a sound, right? So just think about that. It's not enough just to say cup mute, because it has two different positions, and actually some people would say it even has like an almost closed position. So there are ways of dialing in that sound a little bit. So, but yeah, open or closed just depends. I would say probably like closed would be the best sound right here. Okay, and then there was this other thing I just thought I would mention, and this is really fun, like B major and C flat major on harp. And I actually did that myself in my harp concerto, which you might have seen little excerpts of, and it actually works pretty good. I was wondering whether or not it would translate well, and it actually worked perfectly. And this was with this kind of like volunteer community orchestra. That was sort of semi-professional. There were some pros in it. There were just some dedicated amateurs. Pretty good orchestra, Los Angeles Doctors Philharmonic. So it was, or symphony orchestra, not philharmonic, excuse me. And it actually, the intonation was great. I mean, there were a few players that had a problem here and there and some phrases, but the overall intonation of the orchestra was great with the harp tuned to C flat. So, I mean, I thought it was a cool idea. So it does work. Just the whole problem becomes when you get into passages where the music trends natural. You're not able to do double flats, right? So that's the big sticking point. So just watch out for that. Now, I mean, I was able to get away with it in my piece because it was very modal, and I had, I was actually adding A sharp a lot, or sorry, not A sharp. I was adding E sharp a lot to the music. So trending sharp a little bit, and that's easy for that just fits right into the harp. Just pretty easy to be able to just change from F flat to F natural. So, all right. Anyways, but not to get wrapped up in that. I really love the scoring of this. The just very simple, effective low flute, and then just climbing up in clarinets and so on, and flutes, and turning this into octaves and so on, and just a little bit of warm support from the horns. That's just perfect. You can hear the triangle and harp just fine because of just the softness and subtlety. And nobody is getting overstretched or anything. Okay, so it's all great. You do not have to mark an up bow, okay? So, I mean, like, the players will get that, right? And in fact, they will probably want to go up bow, down bow, right? So they may just ignore your your slur mark right in here, or they may just sort of fake it. They may fake the slur, right? Just kind of, there's a way of really making it feel connected even though you're changing bowings. So, which is just, basically legato bowing. So it's, you're using sul tasto. That's nice, beautiful effect. Kind of strange that you don't mark that here, right? Like, I mean, it is almost going to be there anyways with pianissimo. Like, the player will have a tendency to be bowing close to the fingerboard anyways. So, yeah, you're just having them go all the way. But I would say make that unified across the section to all the parts. Now, the one thing that I would say, like, I would kind of point out, and it's just kind of a matter of, like, I don't know, taste is the wrong word, but just a matter of variety, right? So, like, here you are climbing up and you're playing octaves in winds, and and it's also woodwinds that have a very unique relationship of octaves with each other, right? So octaves in clarinets and flutes. Okay, then you go back to like octave winds again, just immediately. So it doesn't. There isn't a feeling of relief or change, right? So we're just staying with the same idea of octave winds. So that might have been a place where you could have possibly taken a different approach, just to give us some feeling of change or moving on, more variety rather than just kind of the same thing twice. Another place where I would say you could have done that is right in here, like maybe slurred the first time and staccato the second time, right? Because it doesn't really feel like enough of a change to really be an answer, right? To be like a reflection or an echo or a response. But I mean, everything else is. I mean, it's all scored pretty nicely. You don't have to keep telling us it's sul tasto, right? Sul tasto is fine and is going to be that way until you say, right here, you should say norm, right? Just to remind us. Fit Ceccato doesn't necessarily cancel out the sense of bowing, because the player will want to know if they should return, right? It's not that. I mean, they will take it for granted that you're going back to normal, but I think it's just polite to say arco, ord, or norm, and then going back to sul tasto, and that just like that keeps them from looking back and saying, oh, just what do I do? It just solves all the problems right there. Okay, so even like if you just have a little bit of pizzicato and then you're going back to arco right away, I would say just let us know that it's ordinary or ordinario or normale, whatever, right? Just give us a little bit. As string players, we appreciate that. Not that it's all that necessary, but yeah. But nicely done. Nice little soft tuba under there. Okay, so here we're getting into a place where like imitating the slurring or phrasing of the piano part is getting you into trouble, right? Because you're just putting a big slur over there to the accent and then a slur underneath to the second voice, just like in the piano, right? Well, that means something on piano, but it doesn't mean anything for winds or brass, just like I was explaining before on a previous score. So really, these two voices are slurring together and going to this, and then you've got the second voice is already slurred, right? So what you really need to do is if you want to preserve that slur right in there, make this into two separate voices and then have a slur that covers all of the second voice going across and one over the top, right? So you really have to be careful about copying slurring patterns from piano music, because sometimes they just don't make any sense. All right. Now, bum, bum. So do you really want that there in terms of the bowing, right? Or do you want da, da, da? Or maybe da, da, da. There's a bunch of different ways of doing it. It can all be covered in one bow. But this is a little curious. Like, once again, we have sort of not quite working out slurring patterns here. So slurring all the way to this, like, I feel that this shouldn't be slurred, right? It should just end here, and then you should play this. Like, they should tongue this clearly. And then here, we got a slur mark, and then another slur mark, and then another slur mark, right? So, why is this in here, right? That doesn't need to be there at all, right? So, like, your clarinets basically, playing that middle voice and then, all right, dropping in right there. And, yeah, the wind should be uniform. This is just, this doesn't work, right? Like, because the players are listening to each other. They all want to phrase perfectly together. And if they're all doing different things, they'll just go do their different things. And that takes away one more way that they listen to each other, right? But if they all have identical phrasing, they will be listening to each other. The firsts will be playing together in this little square in the middle of the wind section, and then their all of the second players will be out to the sides, and they will be trying to match the firsts, right? So just if you make it uniform, then you can get a beautiful, clear sound, and that should be reflected in the strings as well. Although the strings do not have to slur exactly the same way, but the main parts of the, like for instance, everybody hitting this together, right? That will work beautifully. Anyways, I know that's a really small point, but it is all the same. Those are the things that that you can take for granted as a professional, right? And will just end up being sloppy if you are just starting out as an orchestrator. But I mean, all that aside, just really, just like another wonderful take on this. Just really happy to be looking at this, and very cool what you did with the harp there. And yeah, so the brass all works in there, and I like the idea of the cup mutes. So cool score, really love it. Now let's look at the last evaluation for this group of scores. And now we finish with this final delightful interpretation. Very sprightly, very sweet-tempered, and simple in approach here at the beginning. And it's kind of a shame, once again, this was fully scored all the way through, and it would have been great to subject this to a full-scale analysis and spend around an hour on it, or 45 minutes or so, just really taking it apart and looking at some of the pages that come. All right. So, overall impressions, there are really kind of not any little things to pick at that much. Right here we've got all these Divisi staves, but it's much more justified going onwards in the stuff that follows, right? So like right here, it's really unnecessary in terms of, especially the first violin. So the middle strings tend to change into, they justify themselves more. The cellos are pretty much the same. But then here we have things more harmonized. So, I mean, a lot of this could have been scored out just, using intervals on one staff. And that would have been a whole lot easier on me, Graham, in terms of interpreting this, because I could make the staves even bigger. Now, you notice that I cut out some of the instruments that do not play on this page. Like I cut out the celesta part and I cut out the bassoons, right? And that enabled me to bring up the staff size bigger. But it doesn't matter. It's still a very cool arrangement. Now, there are a couple little things to look at, and that is you don't have to say straight mute unless you're going to have a bunch of other mutes, right? So I looked at this piece when I first got it. I haven't taken a look at it again this morning all the way through. So if you have other mutes later on, that's fine. So yeah, for instance, here this is just going to be a mute. So, but usually just mute means straight mute. And yeah, so the other thing is, once again, broadcasting, right? Just like I feel that here, some of this is fine. Like this is cool, but you see, you've already done it here, right? But I think it's not the second one that needs to be cut; it's the first one, because you are walking all over your poor, this beautiful arc here, and then it just sort of robs it of impact when this goes yep, right? Do you know what I mean? There's like the feeling of completion is absent, right? Or it just seems trivialized, right? Whereas like here, this is great because this is leading into this nice bouncy stuff, right? So just maybe like watch out for setting up things like this glissando here or this and this, just like to do it a lot. You start to get lost in it, right? And it starts to take over the music rather than just improving it or accentuating it, right? Now, here at the beginning, possibly the biggest problem is that you got these surges, and I have the piano score right next to me. The thing is that Lily has not really made it easy on you. I mean, you can't really imitate her dynamics in an orchestral way, right? Because she has these little hairpin surges that go back and forth, and they don't actually follow what you've done here. You kind of made 2-bar surges, right? But there's no question that the music eventually reaches something like maybe forte or mezzo forte or something like that. So that kind of doesn't really happen in this score, right? And that's kind of a shame, because I feel once again like the arc does not really have very much power in this arrangement, right? So you take away a little, you subtract a little bit of its significance here, and you also don't really give it any kind of dynamic push, right? I mean, other than that, I mean, it's scored really beautifully for strings. It's a lovely, lush approach, and it's very nicely done. Then you've got the strings right in here. I don't think you need to do this dynamic mixing in here, where the middle strings are are pianissimo, and the outer strings are piano. So I mean, it can just all be piano, right? It's fine. They'll all be listening to each other. Once again, like the danger of having a section of players having mixed dynamics like this when they all are basically playing the same kind of thing. This is the theme, but essentially they're all working together as a group. The problem with that is you'll have players who are sitting next to each other in, playing different instruments who have different markings, but they will just follow the other player because they think that that is the general drift of things, right? So here you have your second violins and violas, and they'll be led by the firsts, and the firsts will say, piano, so I'll play this as nice, restraint, soft, blah, blah, blah. And these other players will be thinking, well, geez, that's what piano sounds like? Or that's what pianissimo, that my marked pianissimo sounds like? Because they'll be thinking that these firsts also have pianissimo, right? They'll be thinking, oh, that's a stronger pianissimo, and then they'll just end up playing the same level as the violins anyways, of course staying under them so that the theme comes out. All right, so just be careful about doing too much of this kind of mixing. But here, I think you're missing a dynamic marking, right? So, I mean, if you're going to be playing bum, 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 then these horns are going to really drown out the strings. So right in here, the strings should at least be mezzo forte as well, if not forte dolce, right? And then this makes sense, right? So the way this is now, you've got muted trombones, and they're sticking out of the sound picture. You know what I mean? And it's just because the strings are so, you didn't mark the strings up louder, right? So some of these are still at pianissimo, right? So that's why that's coming through so unnaturally. There really should have been some kind of diminuendo at the end. Or sorry, not diminuendo. Yeah, diminuendo marks. Sorry. I'm looking at 10 different things at once here. Yeah, so in the score, this bar is piano, right? So bum, bum, bum. Diminuendo here. Bum, soft, right? So we're missing a little bit of marking there. Now this is really fun right in here. Okay, so this is a really clever trick, and this will work on stage as well as it does in the mock-up, and that is, did you guys notice, if you were my viewers here, that it really sounded like the same thing twice? If you don't remember, go back and listen to it again, and then come back to this point in the lecture. So yeah, so the sound of these muted trumpets are playing the overtones. Like the overtones are what sound the strongest, right? Which are the same as the root tones of these flutes. And if you look at my chapter in 100 More Orchestration Tips, where I chart out the spectrum of a muted trumpet versus a just a unmuted trumpet, you just really see where the force of the overtones lie, and that really is in the body of the tone, which is an octave higher than the fundamental, right? And then like it's not just an octave above, but it's also a fifth above and then another octave, and there's like a really bright sheen to the tone in the trumpet that really stands out and gives it its character. So all of those things are at play here, and it really sounds like the same thing twice with a slightly different color, right? So it's a wonderful illusion. So think about maybe using that somewhere, Graham, in your scoring if you haven't already. So because it's a neat trick. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was really, really fun and really effective. It's maybe it could be a little softer though, right? So that's perfect the way it is, and then pianissimo, right, with a little bit of diminuendo at the end. So it's more of an echo, right? And it doesn't feel just like the same thing twice because the flute is going to be naturally brighter. Okay, so other than that, like how can I criticize this string scoring? It's all really nicely done, wonderful, wonderfully realized, and then these warm horns in the middle, and that, just perfectly French kind of scoring here, with the way that you're using the trombones, and then the little resolution at the end. That's all really, really great. I like that a lot, and then a little bit of glockenspiel on top is just the perfect little touch, that helps it be charming. But yeah, I would just say, like, don't set everything up all the time. Just like say, ha ha, see? It's sort of like, hey, look at this over there. It's kind of, that's like when you rush up to things all the time, all right? But a little touch here and there is cool, but like a lot of it you start to notice that instead of the music, right? So watch out. Okay, so really energizing first session here. The first video and this second video I did all in this one morning here. Thursday in New Zealand, Wednesday in the Western Hemisphere and Europe. And just really, really enjoying looking at these and taking my first poke at this massive 90 scores that I got just for the website evaluations alone, and that does not even include the Patreon evaluations, of which I've got like 56 with a lot of them, like almost all of them being, not almost all of them, excuse me, almost half of them being the full length, which I'm really looking forward to. That is going to be coming up towards the end of this month. But anyhow, I did 2 today. I think I'll have lunch now excuse me, breakfast here in New Zealand, and then try another one before I knock off for the day. But thank you everyone for submitting your scores. This is hugely enjoyable for me, and everybody has such great ideas, and I can't wait to see what's coming up next. I hope you can join me for that.